I will take the fall as much as I can. You take the blame for your team, but when something good happens, you give them the opportunity to shine, right? It was all them. So I really try to live by that. I think my experience and the work I'm doing is speaking for itself, hopefully. And then my team performing well is really also a testament to what I'm doing. So ultimately, I just want them to build their experience and their reputation and know that I'm there in their corner if something does go wrong.
Welcome back to Momentum with Sidekick. Today, we're continuing an episode that we did recently around the concept of the talent trap. And actually, the talent trap episode was inspired by Dani Rombough, who is our guest today. So in chatting with Dani, we had been talking about kind of leadership challenges and mostly this concept around like all of our energy is limited, right? So where do you best spend your time and energy in working with your team? I'm very happy to welcome Dani as a guest to our podcast today. Dani Rombough is a retail professional with over 15 years of experience in planning and inventory management at major Canadian retailers, with a strong track record of driving results through data-informed decisions and team development. In addition to a successful corporate career, she also co-founded a math tutoring business operating across multiple cities. So she's known for an authentic leadership style, a passion for building high-performing teams, and fostering growth. Welcome, Dani.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. My first question would be like, I know that you've been listening to a bunch of our episodes, and especially kind of the one that we did on Talent Trap. Can you share a little bit about like what resonated most with you, kind of, or how does that show up in your world today?
Well, I thought it was a great episode. I've listened to it a couple times actually because I've moved teams since first listening to it and really was able to identify team members within your examples and myself. I think I was a few different people depending on where I've been in my career or how things have been going. I really like the skill will matrix as well. I've seen similar concepts but hadn't seen that exact thing before, and I thought it was actually really helped with someone that I've been working with most recently.
Nice. That's great to hear. That's always kind of the type of action that we want to spark, right? So when it comes to your leadership journey, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you had an entrepreneurial career. You went to Sears, Indigo, and now you're at TJX today. When you look back at your kind of leadership journey, and I think, I don't know if you're the same, but you might not even call it that, right? But in hindsight, everything kind of probably fed into like you becoming the leader you are today. So what are some of those moments that shaped how you show up today?
Yeah, it's interesting because it wasn't intentional, probably, right? I was actually at Indigo first right out of university, and then I did return later. And I had a manager there right out of school who was so focused on what I would say and what I think you guys have spoken about with human-centered leadership, that kind of idea. And this was about 20 years ago.
Wow.
It was a newer thing and definitely not, I wouldn't say what I learned in business school. So I feel so grateful that I had that because before I even had the chance to lead a team, we really focused on that development, being a supportive leader, putting your people first. And it wasn't just about output or my own capacity. So I think that really kind of drove everything from there. And then when I was at some other places, I think having senior leaders who really stood for what they talked about and, if they, talked about supporting their team and then were there to support me as a new leader or, during difficult times of performance or maybe even layoffs that they really stepped in to support however I needed them. And sometimes it came in surprising places, but that really shaped like how I treat my team, I think.
And so you already touched upon like a bit of that human-centric approach, which 20 years ago, I imagine was not the common leadership style. And I still think it's not today, but how would you describe your own leadership style kind of beyond those human-centric terminology?
I would say that I'm very open, probably too open in the past, or, you're always finding that balance between friendship and that personal relationship and also being a leader.
Yeah.
But I am generally very open. I try to be as transparent as I can because I think that helps bring people along on the journey. And sometimes when there's, a fast turnaround or something that has to be redone, we do a lot of, data Excel work. So when we're asking people to redo things, it's like, let's bring them along on the journey. I'll fill them in on as much as I can share with anything I know. And then I have pretty high expectations for my team. And we do a lot of calibration, at our company now. And I realize sometimes maybe my expectations for someone might be a bit different, but I think I'm there to support them along the way. But at the end of the day, I do have pretty high expectations.
Okay. So high expectations. There is some analytical knowledge sharing in there for sure, but very anchored in that people focused and potentially or building around relationships.
Yeah. And I think luckily, at TJX, a huge piece is the relationships and networking. And I've really leaned into it even more since being there. I'm a pretty extroverted person, but having coffee chats or connecting my team with other people that I think will help them learn or support something they're struggling with, that's a big part of what I can do. And really getting to know your people, right? Are they dealing with something outside of work that's, affecting their energy or why they're coming in late every day, or just building a personal relationship so you have something to chat about that's not Excel spreadsheets all the time.
You don't like to talk about Excel?
I do love Excel, but
I figured you're a math person, right? So, and you already shared kind of that first leader that you had who was pretty special and kind of helped shape who you are today. Were there more of those type of relationships along the way, or people or organizations that you feel really invested in you as a leader?
I think the most investment I've had is in my current company. To be honest, they have the most structure around it. I have a lot of senior leaders and even my peers who have, shown great support since I joined. Right. Both there's, the formal development programs and then just the sort of coaching, the conversations, feedback is really openly given. Yeah. And I think in a really beneficial way and supportive way. So I would say I've definitely had ups and downs with support, but sometimes you can learn a lot. Well, often you can learn a lot from leaders that maybe don't act how you want to, right? And I think, when you think about business getting challenging, that's when I think people's true colors really come out. It's fine to be or it's easier to be a good leader and be a fun boss when things are going well. But as soon as they aren't, it's that's where your true colors show. And I've seen, I think that's really impacted how I show up, and that consistency I really try to bring, even if we had a tough sales week.
Right. So it is, you also mentioned the more formal development programs that obviously are and luckily are available at your organization today. But to the extent that you're comfortable, right? What would be those things in leaders that you've seen that made you think no, that's not going to be me?
A huge thing, I think, and I've realized more and more as I've got older, is that psychological safety within a team or an organization. Yeah. I can impact my team, at the minimum. And I think I've seen situations where there was not that safety. So whether it can vary from a leader, coming into a meeting and everyone freezing up. It can, I think a lot of times it shows where more junior associates are nervous to share an idea or question something, which we all know this is how you get into really bad situations. Yeah. I think curiosity is really important, and that's how we, keep moving forward as a company. And as soon as you don't have that safety, that is gone. So I would say it's a lot of that, that sort of fear. And I've seen situations where people have not known the answer to something or not known how to answer a question. And instead of that, I'll come back with the answer tomorrow, or let me get right back to you. That isn't an option, and you're almost being tested. Right. And that's a really hard environment to work in, right? You're sort of working as if you're being tested instead of trying to drive the business. So ultimately it never ends up working
assuming
very
good
well.
Intentions around you.
Yeah.
and creating that psychological safety. How do you currently do that in your role, especially kind of when things are under pressure? Because I'm just going on a wild assumption here that also you find pressure and times of stress in your work. How do you continue to kind of anchor yourself in that psychological safety and that leadership style that you embrace?
I think I've got better at it as I've got, more experienced. I think taking a minute to step back. I don't always do this for sure. But I think taking a step back and, okay, when do we need this information for? How important is this? Or, okay, we made a mistake. What's the impact? Who do we have to let know? Bringing the team along on the journey so you're not just saying, quick, do this. My team has to execute a lot of tasks. And so rather than just quick, do this, oh, wait, actually this, you can cause a lot of spin. And I've seen leaders, and I've definitely done it myself in the past, right? Where you're causing a lot of spin because it wasn't probably the right thing or didn't have quite the information we needed. So I try to take a minute. And then I would say I will take the fall as much as I can, right? I think that's the other piece. I've seen leaders that blame their team. And then I think there's lots of examples and quotes and things about you take the blame for your team, but when something good happens, you give them the opportunity to shine, right? It was all them. So I really try to live by that. I think my experience and the work I'm doing is speaking for itself, hopefully. And then my team performing well is really also a testament to what I'm doing. So ultimately, I just want them to build their experience and their reputation and know that I'm there in their corner if something does go wrong.
Cool. How you seem very grounded in your leadership style, right? And I'm sure you have your moments too, but there is kind of calm is something that kind of comes up for me as I hear you talking. And it is great to hear that you seem to be in an organization that is currently rewarding that leadership style, or maybe that's actually a question. Would you say that your leadership style is that the standard within your organization, or do you feel like?
Yeah, I would say that it's probably a little bit different. I also came with a lot of external experience where a lot of people actually grew up in the organization, just happens at TJX. But I think that it does feel like a really good fit.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the stuff I've been doing at other organizations or when I had my own business was sort of things I'd maybe learned from my first manager and kind of through reading and podcasts and conversations with people, I had developed my own style. And at this, in this role, it's supported and encouraged. There's definitely some pieces that I said, I'm probably doing a little bit differently. But it definitely does feel, people leadership and development is such a huge part of any leadership role here, which is what I really like about the organization and what drew me to it.
Nice. And because that is really interesting that you have had such different experiences in corporate environments. How do you feel what are those main differences in how leadership and talent broadly gets developed within organizations? What are some of the things that you feel like any organization should actually do and might still be missing in a lot of corporate environments? And obviously, generalizing, you have not seen them all. I realize that. But
yeah. I think all companies have some, let's say, formal training, right? But that, from my almost first day, that was very different here, the training and onboarding at every role. And this is within the part of the organization I'm in. It's not necessarily the whole organization, but there's a lot of even technical training, making sure everyone's kind of on the same page, right? You want to level the playing field as much as you can right from the outset. And I think that is a huge step up for anyone, even having some days outside of the business and saying, we're going to cover for you so you can go and learn this. Or when I joined, it was, we're not going to place you right away. You get some time to shadow and learn the business. Anywhere else, at least in retail, generally you just get sort of thrown in.
Yeah.
Maybe a few documents to read. And then I think the biggest thing, I've thought a lot about why it's so different here, and it's all the way up to leadership, like people development and supporting your team is really lived through the culture. And we have, days away from the business where we do training or like development on certain skills or talent calibration, things like that. And it always happens, even if especially retail, because it's changing and you can have a hard sales week and then a good sales week. It's hard to predict. In other places I've been, as soon as, if you have a difficult week or an urgent request comes up, that other stuff falls to the side. Whereas here, generally, we really stick to that and value it, and all the way to, the senior leadership, and they're bringing it back, and we're still talking about it and implementing it within our day-to-day. And I think that makes such a difference, and almost like there's no excuse not to invest, and then you take it on yourself, right? And you really care about your own development and your team's development.
Yeah, so there's really something in that consistency, whether it is across all levels, but also across all contexts, basically. Like no matter what happens, this is a priority, and that's only stress tested kind of once you experience that and go through it, and it still stands, right?
Yeah, because we know, right? We know that things come up, and of course, it's not like we're not still getting our work done, or it isn't a bit stressful sometimes when you have a half-day training on something and you have to get something done, but the fact that we are saying, no, it's important, we have to still do this, and we're going to keep talking about it as a group, I think really, and it's not like I would miss it because my, partner asked for something, but everyone else is going, like we kind of all support that. And my leader would support me, postponing what I was asked to do so that I could attend.
Right. Yeah. So it is truly living it, not only saying it, but you see it reflected in how people act, not only how they talk. And I mean, it must be a tension for you as a leader too. Like you have your results that you need to deliver with your team, and you also want to help them grow and develop. How do you balance that on a day-to-day?
Yeah, and it is day-to-day, right? I mean, hour by hour, probably, depending what's coming up. You have in the ideal world, you have all the time to, okay, let's take a little bit more time and I'll sit with you while we do this. I think there's a few things. I think, you're making your best decision of sometimes there is a really urgent ask and maybe I do it and then I'll loop them back after, or the person that, I have, like anyone, you have people at all different experiences and levels on your team. So maybe one person can help, but the other person that's for our next one-to-one will go through it. I also think I try to be as proactive as I can. So if there's issues that keep coming up, obviously you're like, okay, how do we use this as an opportunity for you to show up next time? Let's start pulling
so
this
you don't
information
wait for
ahead
the heat of the moment, but you proactively.
And then they can speak up about it, right? And say, hey, guess what I found? I've been looking at this, right?
Yeah.
Rather than have to be asked. So I think there's a little bit of that, but it definitely, I mean, it's hard, right? And driving the business is a big part of what we do as well. So I think it's also on the team to drive their development, right? And we talk a lot about, they should be meeting you halfway and you can't want it more than them. And I've encountered that too.
Interesting. Yeah.
Where you're kind of like, oh, this is a great opportunity. And they're not really running with it.
No,
or they're
they
not
take
identifying
it because
it.
they have to.
Exactly.
Or something, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. What would you say? It's an interesting concept, I find. Like the meeting them halfway. I've never heard of that before. I mean, not in this context, anyways. How's the balance between like the learning on the job versus more formal training?
I would say the formal piece is like upfront. Here's the skills you need,
Right.
but then a lot of it is on the job. And I think the hybrid environment obviously is different than what I grew up with. I spent a lot of time sitting beside my manager at the office. Here's how to make a graph. It was embarrassing the things she had to show me. But, you had a lot of that time, or, hey, come sit in this meeting. Like you can just listen. Whereas it's different now, right? We're in office 2 days a week generally. So I always think about that. On the job learning is really important and it's a big part of it. But are they just sitting at home unsure what to do? I always have this fear, especially with newer people or people newer in role. Are they just sitting there, not, or really puzzling over something where I could or another peer could help them? So, I mean, we try to check in as much as we can, but a lot of it is on the job and sometimes just takes time. You need to be in a role for a year probably to see the ups and downs and strange situations that come up and the cycles and maybe even anniversary some things to really learn, right? So some of it is just like also giving them that time.
Yeah. Is that remote work? Is that a challenge? I mean, I can imagine in onboarding, like you said, it just goes so organically when you're in an office. And you're clearly thinking about it if you have someone new on the team.
Yeah.
Is that a real thing or?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think we found as good of a balance as we can. And, you know, when the initial onboarding or trainings, we will have in-person like expectations. But it is that piece of, are they okay?
Yeah,
like if they're sitting there, I think about when I first started working and just sitting in cubicles, you would overhear other conversations, right? I learned a lot just by listening to a buyer that sat next to me. I was like, oh, what's she like?
Yeah, so even if you were not doing anything yourself, you would still be learning. Whereas,
and you're like meeting people in the kitchen or whatever it is, right? So I do think a lot about it. We have obviously teams like everyone. Yeah. And I encourage lots of use of our chat, and it's such a, you know, silly thing, but sometimes like I tell them, I don't know what you're doing. And so, you know, when I go to talk about your readiness for the next role, if you're doing all these things kind of, you know, by yourself over even at your desk or at home, I don't always know. So like, how can you, you know, keep sharing at your one-to-ones with me? And then if you're reaching out to the buyers about something, do it in our team chat so I can see, because that's something that is important, right? And I want to know you're doing that.
Yeah, so you're also creating that awareness about the visibility or lack thereof. And it kind of sounds like the same concept of that meeting each other halfway, right? Like you can make an effort to see what they're doing, but your team can also make an effort to show you where they're at.
And it's like less about checking in on what they're doing and more about having those examples to pull from, right? So I can go to my leader and say, hey, guess what they've been doing, you know?
Right, yeah.
It's kind of silly, but I don't know. I think you miss a lot of stuff otherwise while people are at home.
But I love also how you're positioning it as a, like, it's for their growth, and kind of you can only help them grow if you see kind of where they're at.
Yeah, trying to be as transparent about it as possible, right? There is like a little bit of that political visibility piece.
Yeah, that's fair. What are some of the other current challenges that you're running into with your team or leadership or talent in your team?
I would say always for us, it's the partners we have. So my team's great. I think the partners we work with can be challenging. It's generally on, the merchant side, and they're great and very talented and doing a very hard job. But we always, and that is just how my job is in planning. It's a push-pull relationship with them. And after a lot of years, I've worked with all sorts of people, and this is fine. I've worked with a lot more challenging situations before. But for, you think about someone right out of school and pretty junior, that it can be a pretty intimidating relationship. And so trying to support them best I can, but also let them show up and really build those relationships themselves. I would say that's my sort of thing always on my mind. We talked about the hybrid piece. And then I would say the consistency is a big thing. And actually, when I was re-listening to the Talent Trap, and you talked about Chris, and sort of he could kind of be anywhere on the skill will matrix, like depending. I often see that, and especially for people who have been enrolled for some amount of time. I've seen it like in other organizations too, right? It's just natural, but you can have some really good weeks or even months, and then other things come up, or they lose a bit of interest or a bit of steam, and then you're not seeing the performance or the ambition as clearly as you would hope. So I think that's always a thing that we're looking for and we're working on, is just that consistency.
Right. And it's interesting you mentioned Chris, if I recall correctly. He was an employee who had been around the block for a while and seemed a bit disengaged at times. And how do you go about that? And then we also had kind of the high performers who tend to get like all the work, and they just kind of go, but also kind of have carry this invisible load. Are you intentionally doing something kind of with your team currently to balance that, or to kind of make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to grow in their own space?
Probably not as much always as I should be. And this is also that step back, right? I think talk about in that episode actually about Alex, the leader, of just you're kind of feeling under fire all the time and you're running, right? How our teams are structured, there is a bit of a, there's a bit of a level within the team. So definitely trying to have those conversations of those people that are carrying so much. How do we pass that off? Good development opportunity for someone else. And then you can start to level up, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe even just reduce your workload so that you can be more strategic and share in a bit more concise way instead of always focusing on the data. So definitely it is something that we're working on, but it's those people are so good for a reason, right? And I think it's just so natural to be like, can you take this? Can you support, right? So something we should all keep in mind.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm going to push you a little bit more, because if there are listeners, other leaders out there currently, and they are struggling with that same thing, right? Like the balance of work needing to be done, working remotely, it's not always visible, all the various different personas on your team, the thought load that you bring in every day yourself too, right? Like what can they do to like take that pause? Because it's easy enough to say like, just hit pause every now and then. But like, do you have any habits or rituals that you have to kind of check yourself there?
So I was recently in a leadership course, and they had us journal every Friday, or once a week, I should say. I think most people did it Friday. I didn't do it every week, but I really liked the idea. There was kind of that general prompt of like, what went well this week? What was a challenge? What can you do next week to set yourself up? And then there was some other like more specific questions about, your team, or depending the topic we were covering. But I think it's a really good idea. And I know it was really helpful for me, even to get out of my own head where, this didn't go great this week. How could we do it better? Or I think that this person, they struggled with this. Here's what I'm going to do to support. So I think like there is some reflection piece, right? Whether it's on just how the overall team performed, how you performed. And then I know a lot of times I will take 20 minutes on a Friday, 30 minutes to kind of go through the team. And every time I do, I'm sure most people do this, every time we have a one-to-one, like weekly, I take notes and kind of my own notes, and then whatever they're kind of telling me they're working on, or notes that I just have observations. And I will take some time at the end of the week just to go through those, make sure I'm kind of thinking about how we're setting up for the next week. And okay, they really want to work on this. What do we have coming up? Or what have I been doing that I could pass off to them and give them a stretch opportunity? That would be like in an ideal week. Right. That's what I'm doing. And then I think like literally just taking a minute at the office, or, if someone walks by and they're like, quick, I need this. You're like, okay, like I'm a pretty fast moving person. And so I know it's caused a lot of spin for my teams in the past. So I really do try to physically like just take a breath, maybe go for a little walk around the floor, go get a Diet Coke. And then come back and be like, okay, I have a plan. Here's what we're going to do. Here's what I need from you. And that's worked well for me.
Great. That sounds awesome. Is there a mindset that you feel like, and I think we have said it in different words already, but like a mindset shift that you maybe had to make kind of over the course of your career to be the leader that you are today, and to kind of be so intentional about developing your team and showing up for your team in the way that you like?
I think thinking about, actually when we had our company, we had about like 25 tutors working for us, but they were contract part-time university students. So it's very different, obviously. But I remember thinking, you're getting so many messages. You have clients, you have your people, you have business opportunities you're trying to drive. And whenever you're getting all these messages, you're like, how do you prioritize, right? And always saying, really, the team is first. And that was at least how I prioritized it. And so when they're asking a question or they need support, okay, I'm going to put them first, or at least, try to assess the situation first.
Yep.
And I really try to always think of that. I think that was where it really helped me, because if our team wasn't good, like, we couldn't have a business. They were the ones out representing. Our literal name was on the company. So if they weren't going to do a good job, there goes that. So I think I really focused on that and developing them and trying to influence their behavior as much as I could. But I think that was where probably a lot of that mindset shifted. And then now, like, in my role, it's such a huge part of what I do. The business is the business, and I, try to drive it as best I can. But ultimately, and I think at this company, they make that very clear. That is your most important thing, is developing your team.
Developing your team. And so the mindset shift is team first.
Yep.
Everything else second. I love that. And I do think I'm always so glad to hear that this still exists. That sounds a bit dramatic, but I feel like more often than not, leaders get promoted because they're really good at what they do, and they just become this kind of foreman, or like they still have to do all that work and then lead a team. Whereas the way you're expressing it is your number one role is to develop your team, and that's kind of creating that flying wheel. Building capacity within your team so that there will one day be many more Danis.
Yeah, it is the goal. And definitely, you find that balance different times of the year. I'm also very busy with things. So, you're like reassessing that too. But often when I am, there's probably something I could do to pass off some work or say no to something, right? But I think it's really important. And if I ever was a very senior leader somewhere or owned an entire part of an organization, that is what I would, like, you have to enforce that. Otherwise, it's always, where's this work? And you start canceling one-to-ones, and you start, like, that stuff goes by the wayside, right?
Yeah, and it's the consistency that you've been mentioning quite a bit too, right? Like, it's doing what you say that you will do, really living that every day, and truly consistency in doing it, which even the journaling point that you made was also kind of the consistency of every week, just forcing yourself a moment to reflect, look ahead to next week, and in that focus on the team first. So your number one question is like, how can I make my team, or how can I help my team be better next week? Yeah,
and I think so that when you get to the next one-to-one, I mean, we've all been guilty of this, and I am too. You're just really busy, you're back-to-back, and you get to your one-to-one, and it's like, oh yeah, last week we talked about focusing on this, or, that they were struggling with this. We haven't done anything to address it, and again, part of it's on them to own, but I think I really do try to get a bit ahead of, okay, what are we gonna, like, was there a meeting that they could lead this week instead? Because that's what they want to work on. And then we can use our one-to-one to kind of regroup on it, right? Just keep things moving forward.
Love that. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom today. If there's one piece of advice that you can give to our listeners, what would it be?
So I saw this, I think it was a quote, and I think a lot about it. So every day, the people on your team are going to go home at the end of the day, and someone that they love is going to ask them how their day was. And as their leader, you really do have an opportunity to impact how they answer. And I think that's so powerful. And even on the tough days, right? What can you do so that they answer that a bit differently?
I love that. And it is actually very much aligned with a challenge that I wanted to leave with our listeners, is to think back, and we started the conversation there, think back of someone who really influenced your leadership journey or your development journey for that matter, and then ask yourself how you are paying that forward. Like, whose day are you making better today? Thank you, Dani, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great to chat.
Yeah, it was a true pleasure. And I hope our listeners were able to take something valuable away from this conversation. And if you do want to connect with Dani, you can find her on LinkedIn. And as always, if you want to chat further or connect with Sidekick, follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our newsletter, or tune in to our next Momentum with Sidekick episode.